There's a tea that can be purchased for about $2 per box. According to the claim, it does not simply slow facial hair growth and does not remove hair that already exists. Instead, it is said to target the hormone responsible for stimulating that growth in the first place. Research discussed in a peer-reviewed clinical trial reported a reduction in free testosterone of 51%. The plant involved is spearmint, a remedy used in Persian medical traditions roughly 1,000 years ago. A randomized controlled study published in Phytotherapy Research during 2010 examined its effects. The worldwide hair removal market generates approximately $3.8 billion annually. Laser procedures, waxing, threading, and prescription treatments all focus on eliminating existing hair. None of these approaches directly alter the hormonal trigger responsible for continued regrowth. As a result, repeated treatments are often required. The plant at the center of this discussion is Mentha spicata, commonly known as spearmint. It grows naturally throughout the Mediterranean region, the Middle East, and parts of Central Asia. Historical records show medicinal use stretching from ancient Greece to modern times. Its role in women's hormonal health became especially prominent within the Persian and Arabic medical traditions of the Islamic Golden Age. Physicians of that era used spearmint preparations for conditions linked to hormonal imbalance, including excessive facial hair growth. The Persian physician Avicenna documented mint-based remedies for reproductive and hormonal concerns affecting women. Observations recorded in his medical writings suggested that some patients experienced a decrease in signs associated with androgen excess. Although concepts such as testosterone and the endocrine system were not yet understood, patterns in patient outcomes were carefully noted. Medical practitioners working in the courts of medieval Andalusia also incorporated spearmint into treatment programs for women experiencing unwanted facial hair, irregular menstrual cycles, and symptom clusters that modern medicine identifies as polycystic ovary syndrome. PCOS is recognized today as the most common hormonal disorder affecting women of reproductive age. Estimates suggest it impacts between 8% and 13% of women worldwide. One of its defining features is androgen excess, including elevated testosterone levels and related hormones. Higher androgen levels influence hair follicles in ways that can transform fine, light hairs into thicker, darker terminal hairs. This process commonly affects areas such as the upper lip, chin, jawline, and neck. The condition is medically known as hirsutism. Physicians during the Islamic Golden Age observed these symptoms centuries before the biological mechanisms behind them were understood. Knowledge surrounding spearmint's use continued through later herbal traditions across Europe, the Middle East, and Mediterranean cultures. During the 20th century, advances in endocrinology and pharmaceutical medicine led to the development of anti-androgen treatments for PCOS and hirsutism. These included medications such as spironolactone, oral contraceptives, metformin, and flutamide. At the same time, cosmetic treatments expanded through laser procedures, intense pulsed light therapies, and prescription creams. According to the narrative presented, spearmint tea remained largely outside these commercial treatment systems, despite historical use and later clinical investigation. To understand the reasoning behind these claims, it is necessary to examine how unwanted facial hair develops. Hirsutism is associated with androgen hormones. Both men and women naturally produce androgens. In women, these hormones originate primarily from the ovaries and adrenal glands. At normal concentrations, androgens contribute to bone health, muscle function, libido, and energy levels. However, when free testosterone and related hormones become elevated, they bind to androgen receptors located in hair follicles. Certain facial regions contain follicles particularly sensitive to androgen activity. Exposure to increased androgen levels can trigger a process known as terminal differentiation. As a result, follicles that once produced fine vellus hairs begin generating thicker and darker terminal hairs. This mechanism mirrors, in reverse, the process involved in androgen-related scalp hair loss. Elevated androgens can promote unwanted hair growth in some areas while contributing to thinning hair in others. A key point emphasized in the discussion is that laser hair removal destroys specific follicles that already exist. It does not alter the hormonal environment responsible for stimulating additional follicle changes. Consequently, follicles exposed to the same androgen excess may continue undergoing terminal differentiation, leading to the growth of new hairs over time. This explains why laser treatment typically requires repeated procedures. Even the industry describes the outcome as permanent hair reduction, rather than permanent hair removal. The underlying hormonal trigger remains unchanged. Eflornithine cream works by blocking an enzyme known as ornithine decarboxylase, which hair follicles rely on for hair production. Growth slows, but androgen levels remain the same. Once use of the cream ends, follicles generally return to normal activity within a matter of weeks. Spearmint is presented as acting at the hormonal level. The plant contains compounds including rosmarinic acid, luteolin, and a group of terpenoids, particularly carvone and limonene. These substances have been reported to possess anti-androgenic properties. Their activity is described through two main pathways. The first involves suppression of 5-alpha reductase, the enzyme responsible for converting testosterone into dihydrotestosterone. Dihydrotestosterone is considered the most powerful androgen involved in terminal hair follicle differentiation. By lowering 5-alpha reductase activity, the androgen signal reaching facial follicles becomes weaker. The second pathway involves increasing sex hormone-binding globulin, or SHBG. This protein attaches to testosterone circulating in the bloodstream and reduces its biological activity. Higher SHBG levels result in a larger portion of testosterone remaining bound and unavailable for interaction with androgen receptors. Free testosterone, the fraction not attached to SHBG, is regarded as the principal contributor to androgen-related effects. When free testosterone declines, the hormonal signal received by facial hair follicles also decreases. Under this model, follicles are exposed to less androgen stimulation. Over time, terminal differentiation begins to reverse. Newly emerging hairs become gradually finer and lighter than before. A widely cited clinical study appeared in phytotherapy research during 2010. The trial enrolled 42 women diagnosed with hirsutism. Participants were randomly assigned to consume either spearmint tea or a placebo tea twice each day for 30 days. After 30 days, the group consuming spearmint tea demonstrated a 51% decrease in free testosterone. Luteinizing hormone and follicle, stimulating hormone measurements, reflected hormonal changes consistent with reduced androgen excess. Participant evaluations of hirsutism severity also indicated notable subjective improvement. The placebo group did not experience meaningful hormonal shifts. According to the claim, a 51% reduction in free testosterone was achieved through the consumption of 2 cups of tea daily. It is further asserted that standard anti-androgen medications prescribed for hirsutism do not typically produce a reduction of this magnitude without significant adverse effects, while the spearmint intervention reported no adverse effects during the study. Attention is then directed toward the commercial structure of the hair removal market. The worldwide hair removal industry generates more than $3.8 billion each year. Laser clinics, waxing businesses, threading services, manufacturers of depilatory products, and distributors of prescription creams all operate within a framework that assumes facial hair management requires continuing professional intervention or long-term pharmaceutical treatment. The discussion argues that a daily routine involving 2 cups of inexpensive tea challenges that assumption by focusing on the hormonal source. Laser hair removal is highlighted as especially dependent on the hormonal issue remaining unresolved. A typical facial laser package ranges from $800 to $2,000. Treatment generally involves 6 to 8 sessions, scheduled 4 to 8 weeks apart. For women affected by PCOS or hormonally driven hirsutism, results are often incomplete. Continued androgen excess can stimulate additional follicles in treated regions. As a consequence, maintenance sessions may be required every 6 to 12 months on an ongoing basis. The presentation characterizes this as a recurring service model in which treatment continues because the underlying cause remains present. Prescription medications used for PCOS-associated hirsutism are also described as generating continuous revenue. Spironolactone is estimated at $50 to $100 monthly. Oral contraceptives are estimated at $20 to $80 each month. Eflornithine cream is estimated at $100 to $150 per month. Each treatment requires continued use. Benefits diminish when treatment stops. Monitoring may also be necessary because of potential side effects. By comparison, spearmint tea is described as costing approximately $2 per box. 1 box lasts about 2 weeks when consumed at a rate of 2 cups daily. Estimated yearly expense is approximately $50. No prescription is required, no monitoring is required, no side effects were reported in the cited research. The narrative further notes that no company can obtain exclusive ownership of mentha spicata. Likewise, exclusive rights cannot be secured for rosmarinic acid or the terpenoids associated with the reported anti-androgen effect. Because of this, it is argued that there is little financial motivation to fund the large clinical trials needed for inclusion in official hirsutism treatment guidelines. The phytotherapy research study from 2010 remains available. It has been referenced within academic publications and discussed by physicians practicing integrative medicine. The presentation states that it has not been incorporated into dermatology or endocrinology treatment guidelines for hirsutism. Despite this, the information persisted through Ayurvedic practice, herbal medicine traditions, and communities of women living with PCOS, who independently discovered the 2010 study and shared their experiences. Online groups focused on natural PCOS management have extensively discussed spearmint tea protocols. Reports from participants frequently describe a similar progression of changes. Between 2 and 4 weeks, many report less oily skin, which is viewed as an early indicator of reduced androgen activity. Between 4 and 6 weeks, facial hair growth is often reported to slow. Hair that previously required removal every few days may require attention less often. Between 8 and 12 weeks, newly emerging hair in affected areas is commonly described as finer and lighter in appearance. After 6 months of consistent use, many women report that facial hair, once requiring regular professional treatment or frequent home management, becomes minimal enough to require little intervention or none at all. A naturopathic endocrinologist practicing in Seattle began recommending spearmint tea protocols to patients with PCOS-related hirsutism during 2014 after reviewing the phytotherapy research study. Across 5 years of patient follow-up, outcomes were documented. Most patients who consistently consumed spearmint tea demonstrated measurable reductions in free testosterone during follow-up blood testing. Patient-reported hirsutism severity scores also improved significantly among the majority of consistent users over a period of 6 months. She further observed that combining spearmint tea with dietary changes aimed at reducing androgen excess produced the strongest results. A follow-up investigation published in 2015 by the same team responsible for the original phytotherapy research study reported that extended use of spearmint tea was associated with continued hormonal improvement beyond the 30-day conclusion of the first trial. According to those findings, hormonal adjustment continued to develop over months of regular consumption. The biological activity remained the same regardless of whether it appeared in standard dermatology treatment plans. The recommended approach begins with obtaining dried spearmint leaf tea. Peppermint is not included, mint blends are not included. The specific plant identified is Mentha spicata. The compounds linked to anti-androgen activity are associated with spearmint itself. Peppermint contains a different profile of active substances and is not reported to create the same hormonal response. Spearmint tea bags can be found in many grocery stores and health food outlets. A package containing 25 to 30 tea bags generally costs between $3 and $7. At a rate of 2 tea bags each day, one box lasts roughly 2 weeks. Estimated monthly expense ranges from $6 to $14. For loose leaf spearmint, a 100-gram package typically costs between $4 and $8. At 2 cups per day, that amount generally lasts from 1 to 2 months. The next step is preparation. 2 cups daily represent the amount used during the clinical trial that reported a 51% decline in free testosterone. Use 1 tea bag or 1 teaspoon of loose leaf for each cup. Steep in water heated to approximately 90 degrees Celsius for 5 to 7 minutes. Longer steeping times extract a greater amount of the active compounds present in the leaves. Milk is not recommended because milk proteins may attach to certain polyphenols and reduce their availability. Honey may be added because it is not reported to interfere with absorption. The suggested schedule is 1 cup in the morning and 1 cup in the evening. Dividing intake throughout the day is intended to maintain steadier levels of the active compounds in circulation. Morning and evening consumption is presented as supporting anti-androgen activity during both the higher adrenal activity period earlier in the day and the lower activity period later in the evening. Consistency is emphasized. A minimum of 90 days is recommended before evaluating outcomes. The reduction in free testosterone observed during the clinical study was measurable after 30 days. However, visible changes in hair growth patterns require more time. Hair follicles adjust gradually to a changing hormonal environment. A follicle that has produced terminal hair because of androgen excess does not immediately return to producing vellus hair once androgen stimulation declines. The shift occurs across multiple growth cycles. Each successive hair produced under lower androgen exposure may become slightly thinner and lighter than the one before it. Visible improvement generally requires 3 to 6 months of consistently reduced androgen influence. For this reason, stopping after 4 weeks because no obvious hair change is visible may not reflect the hormonal changes already taking place. The hormonal response occurs first. Visible effects follow later through successive cycles of hair growth. Tracking progress is also recommended. Photographs taken every 4 weeks under the same lighting conditions can provide a clearer comparison over time. Daily observation may make gradual changes difficult to notice. Monthly image comparisons can reveal reductions in density and hair coarseness that develop slowly. For individuals with access to laboratory testing, physicians may measure free testosterone, total testosterone, and SHBG before beginning and again after 90 days. Hormonal improvement may appear in blood work before visible changes become obvious. This can provide an earlier indication that the proposed mechanism is occurring. For women diagnosed with PCOS, spearmint tea is described as targeting one aspect of the condition, namely androgen excess. PCOS also involves insulin resistance, ovarian cyst development, and menstrual irregularities. As a result, spearmint tea is presented as a complementary element within a broader strategy, rather than a complete standalone solution. Combining spearmint tea with dietary measures intended to reduce insulin resistance, including lowering refined carbohydrate intake and increasing fiber consumption, is reported to produce stronger outcomes than using spearmint alone. The estimated monthly cost for a hormone-focused hirsutism management approach is approximately $6 to $14. This figure is contrasted with a single laser hair removal appointment costing between $150 and $300. Initial treatment generally requires 6 to 8 sessions. Additional maintenance sessions may be needed every 6 to 12 months thereafter. The industry itself commonly describes the outcome as hair reduction rather than complete hair removal because the hormonal factor remains unchanged. 1,000 years ago, Persian physicians observed that certain mint preparations appeared to lessen hormonal signs associated with unwanted facial hair in women. They recorded those observations and transmitted the information forward. Later, Arabic physicians in medieval Andalusia further developed the practice. Herbal traditions throughout the Middle East and Mediterranean region preserved that knowledge across centuries. Then, in 2010, a randomized controlled trial quantified the effect. The study reported a 51% decrease in free testosterone following consumption of 2 cups of inexpensive tea each day. The discussion concludes by noting that androgen receptors in facial hair follicles do not recognize brand names. Free testosterone is not attached to a patent. Increasing sex hormone-binding globulin does not require ownership rights. From this perspective, unwanted facial hair has been approached at its hormonal source for roughly 1,000 years through a substance available at very low cost. The argument presented is that endocrinology itself has not fundamentally changed. What has changed is the commercial structure built around managing the condition. The global hair removal market generates approximately $3.8 billion in annual revenue. According to the narrative, that revenue depends on the underlying hormonal cause remaining untreated because long-term maintenance services depend on continuing demand. The discussion characterizes this not as a conspiracy, but as the economic outcome of a system focused on symptom management rather than resolution of underlying causes. If this information has changed the way you think about facial hair growth, hormonal influences, and the role of spearmint tea, share this knowledge with others who may find it useful. Continue exploring evidence, asking questions, and examining the historical and scientific records behind commonly discussed health topics. Please leave your thoughts about this content in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.